Artemis 2 has proven to be one of the most impactful spaceflight missions of the decade so far, and I wanted to commemorate that by making this tutorial, which will not only show you how to build a replica of the Orion and SLS in Kerbal Space Program, but also how to recreate the exact mission profile flown by NASA. From the launch to the moon and back, all done in KSP. But before we go flying, let's first walk through the build process. Alright, here we are in the vehicle assembly building where we can get to work on our Orion spacecraft and SLS rocket. Now, as we get started here, there are a couple of quick little housekeeping items I'd like to get out of the way. So, first of all, the Making History DLC is going to be especially important for this build. I know the video title has stock in it, and to different people that can mean different things, but in my opinion, and for the purposes of this video, stock includes the DLC, so going to be required. And second of all, you may have noticed there are quite a few mods installed in my game, whether it be the UI here, or the clouds, or the reflections, or any of that stuff. I want to just stress that these are almost completely just visual mods, so I don't want to kind of scare anyone who may be on console or who just doesn't have these mods into thinking this tutorial isn't applicable to them. Every single part I place, you can place as well, regardless of which mods you may or may not have. So with that out of the way, we can get properly into the build. And we have our Mark 1-3 command pod here, and we're going to go ahead and put a heat shield on it. Very important part that I have forgotten on more times than I would like to admit. But after that, we're going to go ahead and chuck a decoupler on the bottom of that. And that is going to wrap up most of our command pod already. So quick little going quick here. Throw the docking port on the top like that. And now the other thing that I have forgotten more times than I care to admit are the parachutes. So go ahead and stick one on here. There's 3 in total on the real thing. So you're going to want to get into mirror symmetry by pressing R and snapping that on like so. Using the pressing C to enable snap makes this a lot easier to get it in kind of like a nice convenient location. You can toggle that there. You see how the circle switches to a hexagon. Now go ahead and throw some drogue chutes on. Want those? Go ahead and put 2 of them in the mirror symmetry as well. And now we can go ahead and put on a launch escape system, which is very important for the health and safety of our crew. Although this is KSP, a lot of people don't seem to take that with the highest of kind of concern levels that they do in real life. But we can go and be nice to our Kerbals today by putting a launch escape system on top of our capsule. We'll go ahead and fill this fairing in a moment after we get a little bit later on once we get finished with some of the other stuff to kind of round it out. Now, we want to start work on our European service module, so thank you to ESA for that. And we are going to start by putting ironically, a decoupler, although this thing is basically just serving a cosmetic purpose. You can switch this out with a different part if you like. Now, as does the real thing, we are going to slim on down to the 1.875 meter diameter. This is where the Making History DLC comes in. So we're going to go ahead and put on the payload section here the service module on there like so. Now, we are going to get one more fairing, put that down there, flip it over, and that'll round out kind of the main structure of our service module. We're going to go and chuck a Terrier engine on the bottom, switch that to this mode, get all that kind of shroud stuff out of the way. And now we are going to start working on the RCS, or the reaction control system of this vehicle. Now, in the real one, there are kind of 2 pods of 4 here on the bottom. We're going to go ahead and mimic that. We're going to go and turn off snapping. Go ahead, 1, 2, 3, 4, hit X a few times, get that symmetry in there. Go ahead and line that guy up, and we'll get on the other one. Let's see here, try and get him a little bit nicer. I'm using these kind of little nubs here as a guide. You can do a little bit of fiddling. It's not perfect, but it looks pretty good. Actually, we want it to be perfect. There, that's pretty much perfect. Now go ahead and put a couple of these guys on here with the kind of 2 nozzles. Put 4 of them on there and 4 of them on there. It's very difficult to get exactly right what they have on the real thing. You can kind of take a little bit of liberties, but I think, with however many nozzles you want and where you want to put them, I generally think this is the closest to the real thing, so that's what I'm gonna recommend for this tutorial. Similarly, another dilemma I faced was the solar panels. Now, the real solar panels basically look exactly like this part. But as you can see, these things are actually kind of, they have this ridiculous like box thing that I found very difficult to kind of make visually work. So I decided to go ahead and use these ones that are maybe a little bit smaller than the real thing, but they aren't so kind of cumbersome. So, you know, do what you want on yours. For mine, I'm going to go ahead and do this. Now, the solar panels aren't actually perfectly symmetrical in a 4x4 like that. They're actually kind of offset. So we're going to go ahead and do two like here. And we're going to go and do the other two right here. And actually, I made a mistake on the RCS here. We're going to go two on the RCS. Actually, we can separate that out one more. Two on the RCS and two like that. So that'll give the spacing even, and you can put these ones however you like, because they're obviously not in the way of the solar panel. Now we can pop open the shroud by clicking on there, and we need to outfit the payload for our service module. Now we're going to want to go ahead and put some fuel in here, so I'm going to take one of these small Oscar B fuel tanks, turn off snapping, and chuck it in the kind of bottom shelf of each of them like that. Go ahead and press 2 or press the move tool here, click that, up we go, and that can kind of line it up like that. That'll be our propellant for the main engine. Next up, we need some monopropellant for all these RCS thrusters we've chucked in. I can just take this one little fuel tank. There is some built into the command pod, but never hurts to grab a little bit more. If I could actually grab the right part, that would be appreciated. I just like to do one of these up on this little extra, like high one without the little overhanging shelf. Rest of the spots are, a lot of it's up to you. If you're in science mode, you may want to put some science in these different kind of compartments here. I would recommend chucking some batteries in. You can't ever go wrong with batteries. You want to have as much electric charge as possible for your mission, because we don't want to have them running out. Put maybe some more there. Batteries here, batteries there. And maybe if you want a little bit of extra control authority, you can go ahead and put a reaction wheel on here. That'll maybe make your life a little bit easier. Put that up on that higher shelf. And now we can close up the shroud and make sure nothing's sticking out. No, it isn't. And that is going to wrap up the service module. We're moving here. Now, as we continue on down the rocket, we're going to be looking toward the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, which is kind of the upper stage of technically part of the SLS rocket, which is essentially a Delta IV upper stage from the retired orange rocket that liked to basically light itself on fire when it launched, which was very exciting. Now, we're going to go ahead and put a 2.5 meter fuel tank. Or we can actually go, let's put a decoupler on there first. Decouplers are pretty important. You can kind of decouple on that other thing, but we're going to go and chuck we can chuck one of these guys on here and chuck one of you on there. I think that's what we're going to do. It's going to be the easiest way of doing that. Go and turn off the shroud. And now we need to start building out some of these fairings, because this all looks kind of open and exposed, and in this case floating, and we don't like that. So this part can get a little bit janky. What we're going to want to do is set up this fairing to kind of cover the bottom of the engine and extend not too far, but extend to about to here. And we can go ahead and probably do it like that. Hit Alt and left click to close it like that. Now we can take this guy, and this fairing is going to essentially be an arrow fairing. Go ahead and turn snapping back on. Go ahead and all the way up there, and you can see when it turns blue, we can just hit left click and close, and that'll enclose our service module so it doesn't get all messed up with the airstream, all aerodynamically lovely, right? Now we can cover up the command module with our fairing here. So go ahead and see here. Sometimes you can make it a little bit nicer, maybe go like boom, and then you don't want that orange, because that orange obviously means it ain't gonna work. Look, I can go with that. There we go. That'll cover up the command module, and that'll create a nice little unified little system here for the launch escape. Now we want the ICPS. Like I said, we can get properly started on that. I like to grab one of these small 2.5 meter tanks. throw it on there. And we are going to grab one of these guys, and we are going to go under the structural tab, and we are going to grab one of, not you, one of you. Boom. We're going to grab another U, and we are going to grab another U, and we are going to grab a U and another U. There we go. Now we're going to add the struts that you can see in real life, are these kind of struts that basically act as structural supports between the the hydrogen and the liquid oxygen tank on the ICPS. So we're going to go back to the structural tab, grab our struts, hit X a bunch of times to get up to 8-way symmetry. And we're going to go all the way out. Important to do this on the top one. Top tank going down, it works much better if you do that. Go all the way out to the edge as far as you can go is my recommendation. And here, and we're going to bring it all the way down to about here. You want to aim it at the kind of this tapering fuel tank here. Don't aim it at this one or else it tends to mess up. So target there. You can go ahead and go about here. We're going to want to make an X pattern with these. So we'll grab the second set, kind of line it up about there, line it up, make ourselves an X, and there we go. Beautiful. Now we need an engine for the stage. Very important. Now this is a bit of a, I'm not totally settled on which engine I like to use here. So you can use obviously the Cheetah engine in this mode, or you can get rid of that kind of tapering section and chuck it right up there, which this is what I used for most of my SLS building days. You can use the Wolfhound engine, or you can use what I have decided for this build is the Skiff engine, which this thing is based on a Saturn V, second stage and third stage engine. So, historically, not all that applicable, but, we're going for looks here, right? We're going for looks. We want this thing to kind of act like the real rocket. And I think this is the engine that most looks like an RL-10 at the scale that we're dealing with. So we can now continue down the rocket. We're making pretty good progress here as we get ready to start work on the core stage, the big orange thing. We like orange, don't we? Put a decoupler here, get rid of that shroud, and we can grab ourselves a 3.75 meter fairing. Now, one thing that really bothers me is we want this section's supposed to be orange, right? But the fairing is like orange and that's like a weird Soviet green. I would, as much as I wish there was a way to do it purely orange. So it's a slight sacrifice, but this is really the only way to make it work. Now, what you want to do is go up a little bit, and then we want to taper the fairing to reach its maximum length and taper up into there. You see how I tapered it isn't quite going, so we're going to add just a little bit more section there, and there we go. Beautiful taper, and now we can enclose the ICPS. Now, we can construct the main orange tank. So we grab this guy here, turn him orange, grab another one, turn him orange. You can actually just turn it orange up there and save yourself a little bit of time. Grab a third one, turn him orange, and we can grab a Mammoth liquid fuel engine, and we can't turn it orange because it's not supposed to be orange. Beautiful. With that done, we can move on to the solid rocket boosters. And this is another kind of controversial topic. I have kind of waffled back and forth for many years over which solid rocket boosters are best for the SLS. So kind of the candidates are, you guys can let me know what you guys prefer and what you guys use on your own, are the Clydesdale engine, which are actually modeled after the SRBs used on the space shuttle and hence the SLS in real life. But however, they are like way too wide and huge. That is kind of the downside. The other option is to use the Kickback, which are of a similar style, but they're kind of too narrow. The third option is the Pollux booster, which is kind of like completely the wrong style. It's not really based off of the Space Shuttle SRB, and the nozzle looks weird and the color's a little off, but the diameter is basically perfect to what the real SLS uses, the scale. So for that reason, for actually most of my KSP days, my SLS days, I use Clydesdales, but recently I've had a change of heart, and I'm going to recommend you guys use the Pollux boosters, and they are too small. We'll deal with that in a second. This may, some of you may strongly disagree with me, but you know what? I think this is right. To address the height problem, what I like to do, and this also, visually, this is, a counter argument to using this this booster, but I like to stack a couple of fuel tanks on top of it like that to basically get the size right, and then you throw a little fairing on the top. Go ahead and call it that. There we go. I was debating myself whether or not those were too kind of pointy, but I think they look good. So, if you think this doesn't look right, feel free to use a different SRB. Like I said, I've gone back and forth a bunch of times, and I think this is what I like, and I think this is what we're going to be doing. Next up is we're going to grab some Sepatrons. These are going to be the little SRBs that kind of move the booster away from the rocket so it doesn't crash into the rocket when you're separating them, which can be a big problem. So we get the symmetry up, we get 2 of them, and we go to the other side, 1 of them, 2 of them. Oh, that was backwards. That is going to launch it into the rocket. We don't want that. We definitely don't want that. You can set these up basically however you like. I like to do 2 at the top and 1 pair on the bottom. Obviously, you can do whatever you want. And then I also recommend you go to hit the rotate tool or hit the number 3 key and give these guys one little kind of rotation upward. It gives them a little bit cleaner of a separation, just so it doesn't accidentally, you don't want your boosters to fall into your core stage. Boom. Okay. Finally, to basically round out this build, we are going to grab some launch clamps. Very, very nice indeed. So, go ahead and go 2. Kind of get these at the same height. 2. And 2. I think that looks good. There we go. We have basically the bones, the structure, the crux, the soul is completed of our build. Now we have the details, which are a little bit annoying and tedious, but very, very important. Do not click away. Do not skip to the launch section. We need to get the deal. We need to get the staging. We need to get the action groups and a couple of other things. One of those other things is auto strut. Now, you can do this kind of as you go, which I generally would recommend. Or you can do it at the end and just get everything auto-strutted. And this isn't a huge build, so it's not, vitally important for some of the bigger rockets people make. If you don't auto-strut, you are literally everything's going to explode and die. So, very important. Get at least the important things, couplers and big fuel tanks, and get all those auto-strutted up. It's a little bit less important on the top here for structure. We don't want everyone's rocket noodling and falling apart and all sorts of stuff like that. If you don't have the auto-strut option available to you, it's because you don't have advanced tweakables turned on. So what you want to do is you want to go to the settings menu and click on enable advanced tweakables, and that'll get you your auto strut. Important to do it on the clamps as well. We want to make sure these guys are nice and snug on our rocket. Definitely wanted the decoupler here if I didn't do that yet. I did not. There we go. Okay, that'll be good. Next up, staging. There are, by golly, a lot of stages here, and we need to get them all set up correctly because we don't want all our boosters and stuff flying in weird directions. So first thing we can do to simplify the staging is we can turn off the staging on the items that do not need to be staged. So that fairing does not get staged. These fairings do not get staged. And I think this guy sometimes, yeah, we can disable staging on that guy as well. Perfect. Now, let's start at the bottom and work our way up. So, first thing we do is, if you look at how the real thing launches and how space shuttles launch, they start with the main engine, the 4 main engines, the 4 RS-25s. We, throttle them up, get them going, and then once they're set, we hit the boosters, and that's when the vehicle actually lifts off the pad. So we're going to mimic that. So the bottom stage here is going to be just the Mammoth engine, which is technically, you know, the 4RS-25s. And then the second stage from the bottom is going to be the SRBs and the launch clamp. So that'll actually be what gets us in the air. Next up is going to be the decoupling of the SRBs. So we're going to go ahead and throw that on, and we want to put all of the Sepatrons in that stage, so they are made to fire like so. Next up is going to be the fairing and launch escape system jettison. So we're going to take this fairing right here, which is going to be this guy, throw him down in the next stage. And speaking of separating this guy, we're going to go ahead and turn that down to 2, turn injection force up, and turn clamshell deploy on. After that is going to be the launch escape system, which is going to be this guy. We're going to have him fire, and we're going to have him... actually, no, I misspoke. This needs to be done in the action group, so we'll save that for just a moment. Sorry. We'll get to that. So next we'll do the staging of that and staging of you. So that'll get the ICPS going, and then we'll want to have the next one, which will get the... which will separate the Orion spacecraft with the ICPS. So throw that guy on there, just double checking that's the right, and you're the right, yep, and we can decouple. We want this fairing to pop at the same time as well. So you, we can, you know, clamshell deploy, all that stuff, injection force up and all that. And then we should, in theory, be left only with stuff that we are gonna leave for our landing, or stuff on the capsule, basically. So all the parachutes and all that. And this stuff we're gonna mostly relegate to action groups. You can, some of the stuff you can set up in the staging menu, but I like to do it on the action group. So we can nicely transition into the action groups. First up is the actual launch escape system. So this is in the event of an emergency. We need to escape the crew and get them to safety. Activate engine. Decouple. That'll pull that away. Action group 1 is going to be the non-safety critical separation of the launch escape system. So we're going to want to fire this guy, but instead of pulling away with the crew, we are going to just have it undock, and we are going to have it deploy the fairing. And clamshell deploy on. And we'll give it 4 sides just to spice things up a little bit. This thing actually in real life, the fairing, I don't believe actually separates on separation, but we get Kraken attacks in KSP if we don't do that. So we are going to elect to separate it. Custom 2 is going to be our solar panels. So we can just save ourselves the hassle of having to click on them individually. Custom 3 is going to be our drogue chutes. And Custom 4 is going to be our main chutes. Just be sure to cut the drogues whilst deploying the mains, because we don't want to have all of them going at the same time. That would be unrealistic. Now, that is it, actually. Pretty easy, if I do say so myself. A lot easier than some of the other tutorials I've done, like the space shuttle. Space shuttle can be a bit of a nightmare, especially getting the thrust lined up and stuff. This guy, nice and easy. So, with that, that's going to conclude the build portion of our video, and we can proceed to the launch. That launch, SLS is now airborne and lofting the Orion spacecraft toward the moon. To gain altitude, we can start a very gentle gravity turn. Crossing 7 kilometers, the core engines are throttled down for max Q, throttled back up through 10 kilometers. Watching now as the boosters deplete as we prepare for booster separation. There's a clean separation, and the core stage is now continuing its ascent towards the moon. In line with the real mission, we're going to be targeting an eccentric orbit, so we're going to be depleting that core stage almost fully, but not quite. We're going to target an apoapse of around 500 kilometers, then we're going to cut the engine and separate the ICPS. As we enter the thinner parts of the atmosphere, we can now get ready to ditch those fairings and the launch escape system. There they go. Now only a few hundred more meters a second to go, and we are going to arrive at Miko. Now getting ready to separate the ICPS as the core stage of the SLS has finished its job, and we can transition into the next phase of our mission. We are now going to let what is remaining of our spacecraft coast on up to our apoapse, where we're going to commence the perigee raising maneuver, in which we're going to burn a little bit at that apoapse, just so we can make sure that the periapse, or the perigee, kerbin, is outside of the atmosphere. We don't want to be like the core stage. We don't want to come back around and just melt. We want to stay in space and go to the moon. So very short little burn is exactly how they do it in the real mission. And then we are now in orbit. So with KSP, things are smaller, so scales and fuel tanks and delta V scales a little bit differently. So the ICPS in the game has way more fuel than the real one does. So we're going to actually end up ditching like 2/3 of the propellant. So ignore that, but we're trying to keep things realistic. So this burn, which is going to be an apogee raising maneuver, we're going to raise our apogee almost basically to Mun height. In real life, this would expend all of the fuel in the ICPS, but as you can see, we still have a ton left. But since we are realistic, like I said, we are going to be ditching the ICPS after this burn is complete. There it is, and now we can get ready to decouple. At this point, we are going to be preparing for the actual lunar encounter. You can line this up beforehand during launch at any point. I find it easier to just line it up afterwards, so you can just make the maneuver node and then add orbit a couple times if you need to, until you get a nice Mun encounter. And this is kind of the little bit of the, maybe not the tricky part, but one of the trickier parts of the mission is to actually get the free return trajectory. So you want to have lined up, so we're going to pass the Mun in the retrograde direction, so we're going to pass opposite its rotation as we come around here getting ready for that burn. And then we've set up the maneuver node such that we are going to pass the Mun, and then that is going to basically give us a semi-gravity assist. And, well, not really. We've really just burned ourselves into Kerbin. Anyway, whatever the reason is, the result is that we are on a free return trajectory, meaning we are going to automatically re-enter the atmosphere after encountering the Mun. This is done mostly for safety reasons, so we don't have to worry about firing the engines a second time. Famously saved Apollo 13 and resulted in a very successful Artemis 2 mission, right? So we're going to be coming around 40,000 meters, 40 kilometers above the surface of the Mun, much closer than the real mission, but you know, we like to make things a little more theatrical in KSP, don't we? So with that burn complete, it takes a little bit of fiddling to get that maneuver node set up correctly. But once you do, we, as you can see, our trajectory is re-intersecting the atmosphere of Kerbin, making a little bit of a correction burn en route, just so we can get ourselves a little bit more equatorial, because we like to be equatorial, and we don't want to kind of end up landing all on some, like, on the North Pole or anything weird like that. So as the Earth begins, or the Kerbin begins to dissipate in the background, we are now on our way to the Mun, and we have finished our last burn, so we are basically just passengers for the rest of the mission as we enter the Mun sphere of influence. And there's a little bit of a sunset, or a Munset, not sunset, and a sunrise as we come around the other side. And now the very photogenic part of the mission as we cross our perigee, perimun, periapsis, and the Kerbin rises on the other end. You can see us now slinging around, and we are going to come back into Kerbin, landing a little bit on the nighttime side, right around kind of the dawn, just before dawn at our landing site. So as we prepare for re-entry, we're going to decouple that service module, orient that heat shield first, and now prepare for the fiery re-entry into Kerbin. We have past peak heating and the plasma is dissipated. And now, just like we've set up reaction groups before, we're going to open them up. They're the drogues, and a little bit later, at around 1 kilometer in altitude, hit the next action group, pop open the mains, and that is going to bring us under the canopy and bring the mission to an end. Welcome back to Kerbin, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Hope it was useful. With that, we're going to end today's video. So thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Please rate or comment to this video. Once again, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. And bye.